Welcome everyone to our panel on business commitments to a sustainable future. My name is Catherine Wendell, and I am the Executive Director of the Center for Ethics and Social Responsibility at CU Boulder's Leeds School of Business. Let's start with a quick snapshot. By 2023, there will be 8 billion people on our planet. By 2050, there will be almost 10 billion people. Today, 3 billion people live in places highly vulnerable to climate change, as estimated by the IPCC. Right here, right now in Boulder, Colorado, we are experiencing climate impacts. Last year, the Marshall Fire, fueled by extreme drought and high winds, destroyed more than 1,000 homes just a few miles from this stadium. The message coming out of COP27 in Egypt is that climate action now, including a just transition, is important for everybody. It's the right thing to do, it makes economic and business sense, and it enhances national security and global peace, because scarcity creates conflict around the world. Business plays a crucial role in enabling innovation and driving solutions, and many business leaders are eager to move from sustainability goals to action. We have an outstanding group of panelists here today to talk about their company's commitments, actions, challenges, and what more needs to be done to promote a sustainable future for all. First, I'd like to introduce Mark Cruz over on the end, who is the General Manager for Sustainability Solutions in Microsoft's Environmental Sustainability team. A 22-year Microsoft veteran, Mark's team oversees Microsoft's sustainability product strategy, customer and partner engagements, and the $1 billion Climate Innovation Fund. Next to Mark, we have Jeannie Renee Malone, who leads global sustainability at VF Corporation, overseeing all aspects of VF's sustainability strategy across its brands, operations, supply chain, materials, and products. Next to Jeannie, we have Ashley Ruiz, who serves as the National Director of Corporate Social Impact at McKinstry, a national leader in designing, constructing, operating, and maintaining high-performing buildings. Ashley is responsible for all corporate initiatives focused around social and environmental responsibility. And finally, we have Josh Soslak, an internationally recognized advisor on climate and disaster resilience and sustainable development, and a managing director at Deloitte Consulting. Josh advises governments, corporations, international organizations, and NGOs on building sustainable and resilient infrastructure and business opportunities in both the developed and developing world. I want to point out that we have 2 large public companies with global operations represented, namely Microsoft and VF Corp, in addition to 1 private company with a national presence, that's McKinstry, and 1 partnership with a global services network, Deloitte. We are so grateful to all of you for participating. Thank you so much. All right, so let's get started with question number 1. Panelists, can you please tell us about your company's commitments to a sustainable future? How does your company define sustainability? What targets have you set, and what actions have you taken? And I think we'll start with Mark and just go down the line, if that's okay.
Sure. Well, thanks everyone for being here. Microsoft made its first sustainability commitment back in 2009, and that was really just around avoided emissions offsets and some idea of being carbon neutral. And we kind of bumbled along doing, taking care of our own footprint, but it was really, and I think about 2017 and 18, after then President Trump pulled out of the Paris Agreement, that you really saw the rise of the private sector getting together. So Microsoft was having a lot of conversations with our peer companies, which really was like, hey, this is pretty messed up. And if our government is not going to act like a government, we're going to act like a government. And that's when we really sharpened our pencils. And in 2020, we made 4 consecutive announcements on what is now our 2030 commitments to climate change. And that is to be carbon negative, water positive, zero waste company that protects ecosystems by building a planetary computer. So let me take those one at a time. Carbon negative means that we will reduce our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, and it's mostly scope 3 for us, by 60% by 2030, and then we will durably remove the rest. Not avoided emissions offsets, but durable carbon removal. And we will exceed, so we will remove and reduce slightly more than we put out every year until 2050, and we will sweep back all of the historic emissions from the founding of the company in 1975. So we will be negative by 2030, and by 2050, from an atmospheric perspective, it will be as if Microsoft never existed. To be water positive is to make sure data centers use a lot of water. We do not want to be the company that comes into a community. We have 254 data centers and makes water more scarce or more expensive. So we will replenish more water in every community that we work in around the world. In terms of zero waste, that means we've set up 5 circular centers in our 254 data centers as hubs, and we recycle or reuse 90% of the e-waste that comes out of data centers. So server racks, shells, all of the traditional e-waste. So 90% of it is diverted or reused. And then in terms of protecting ecosystems, we're building this thing called a planetary computer, which is a massive compute problem and cloud storage thing. Really only 3 companies in the world could do this. We're talking about exabytes of scale of data, but it's really aggregating all the geospatial or spatio-temporal data. So it is like a database of all of Earth's natural systems, and it can be reasoned over and overlaid and looked at in real time and have many, many applications, for example, climate risk management. So those are the 4 commitments we've made. The next 2 areas, which I'll talk about very briefly since we don't have a lot of time, that's Microsoft sustainability. We are only 3/100ths of 1% of global emissions. So how do we influence the other 99.97%? Well, we help our customers and partners by building climate tech. So our Cloud for Sustainability is an advanced carbon measurement system. That is a commercial offering for all of our customers. And then the 3rd concentric ring is global sustainability, which is how do we just help the world by advancing carbon markets. We have a global skilling initiative. We influence policy around the world. We literally have this cool Power BI dashboard that shows every policy we're trying to influence around the world. So Microsoft sustainability, customer sustainability, and global sustainability. And the final thing I would say is that I was at the UN General Assembly with my boss, Brad Smith, our president, and he went on the record and said, when we look back in 2050 or 2030, we believe that no company in the world will have done more, no institution in the world will have done more to combat climate change than Microsoft. So this is not some passing fancy for us. We're very deeply committed and in it for the long run.
Great, thank you. Jeannie?
Great. Thanks, Mark. That was super inspiring. Well, first of all, hi, everyone. Nice to be here today. Thank you so much for the invitation. And maybe I'll just start out by telling you who is VF Corporation. A lot of people know our brands, but not necessarily VF. So VF is one of the world's largest apparel, footwear, and accessories brands. And we own a number of iconic outdoor activewear brands such as Vans, The North Face, Timberland, Smartwool, and Dickies. And we are very focused on sustainability because it's deeply tied to our brands. Because our brands are outdoor focused, we have a deep tie to environmental stewardship and social responsibility. And similar to Microsoft's journey, we started out several years ago and established a platform and a strategy that we've named Made for Change that really outlines a number of social and environmental goals that we since then have tracked progress, created initiatives, created roadmaps for. And then in 2019, we decided that we needed to have a bit more of a broader umbrella goal over all of our environmental goals. And so we established our ambitious science-based targets. So similar to Microsoft, it sounds like we have the majority of our impacts are in scope 3. 1% of our impacts are in scope 1, but that does not mean, our scope 1 and 2, but that does not mean that we put less emphasis there. But the majority of our impacts and our efforts rely on our scope 3 emissions reduction strategies. And so to get to the point of setting ambitious science-based targets, we had to look across our entire value chain and understand what are our impacts. And so we know that 70% comes from raw material extraction, processing, and production. The remainder from logistics and a few other aspects along our supply chain. And so we know that if we're going to make a difference, we need to focus on raw materials and factory operations. So that's really where our emphasis resides. Now, from a scope 1 and 2 perspective, we know that renewable energy is our pathway. So we are a signatory to RE100, and we're well on our way to meet our 2025 goal that of powering 100% of our direct operations with renewable energy. And we've recently initiated a tax equity investment, investing in 4 large-scale solar projects in South Carolina through a tax equity investment process. And with that, that demonstrates our commitment not only to doing the right thing for ourselves, but to creating new renewable energy for the grid. Now, from a scope 3 perspective, we have a number of strategies in place that I'll talk a little bit about now. But one of them that we're super proud of is leaning in on material substitution. And so we've set a vision that we're going to focus on our top 9 materials and look at converting to recyclable, regenerative, or responsibly sourced renewable materials. And so we are doing a lot in that area. And we're last year, when we published our latest sustainability report, recognized that we're 76% of the way to meeting our 50% recycled polyester goal by 2025. We've also done quite a bit in sustainable cotton. And then from a factory operations perspective, that's where a lot of the transformation can truly happen. And so we're working closely with a number of our suppliers across our supply chain to help them convert their factories to be more operational efficient. So that entails putting rooftop solar installations in there and really looking at those energy efficiency opportunities and wastewater improvements. So we have a lot of work that we're doing across our entire value chain. We also, on the social side, also have a goal that we want to aim to improve the lives of 2 million people across the communities where we work by 2030. And so we've established a very innovative worker and community development program where, as we've reported in our FY22 report, we, just in that year alone, we improved or had some sort of influence on about 250,000 individuals over the course of that year. And since we started that program, we've improved the lives of about 650,000 people. So we are looking for opportunities to both improve the livelihoods of the people across our supply chain, within our own communities, within our offices, and also to reduce our impacts along the way.
Thank you. Great, Ashley.
Well, great. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for being here today. So I also wanted to just start off saying a few words about McKinstry and who we are as a company. We are a full-service design, build, operate, maintain firm that was started in 1960 in Seattle as a plumbing company. And we now focus on all aspects of the built environment to really make buildings better and more efficient and more high-performing across the board. We are a much smaller company than most of my partners here today. We have about 2,500 employees across the country. Half of those are skilled craft workers that are predominantly located in the Pacific Northwest. And we also are a social purpose business, which is Washington State's semi-version of a B Corp as well. So caring about the planet, caring about climate is very much just a part of who we are as an organization. In terms of the built environment, buildings matter relative to sustainability. They estimate that about 40% of global energy-related CO2 emissions are from the built environment. About half of those are from buildings, the embodied carbon that is actually in concrete and steel and the materials used to build buildings. And the other half is in the operating of those buildings. There's a huge opportunity then in that space to really decrease that impact and that footprint. We also estimate that about 50% of the energy in buildings is wasted. So not only is it emitting, but it's emitting unnecessarily because we don't need to be using all of that energy. So at McKinstry, we really think about sustainability as part of our broader commitment to impact across the board. We have a really aspirational strategic plan that is called Action for Impact that is geared around addressing 3 primary crises: the equity crisis, the affordability crisis, and the climate crisis. And this isn't just a peripheral plan for us. This is our core top operating plan as a company, as an organization. So climate, along with equity and affordability, are embedded in every single part of our strategy and our goals. And I think when we think about the climate space in particular, we do have a standalone climate commitment. And as part of that, we have an aspiration to reduce our GHG emissions by 50% by 2025 against a 2019 baseline year. We also were one of the first 10 global signatories to the Climate Pledge, and we have our own additional goal of being net zero by 2030. And so we've been doing work internally in that space. We've been working on some fleet electrification initiatives that I'm planning to talk a little bit more about later here today, working on facility upgrades, a number of other things. But like Mark mentioned as well, our impact as a company is actually pretty small. We see a much bigger opportunity in terms of influencing the built environment overall. So thinking about buildings more holistically, helping our clients to decarbonize, really just leveraging the opportunities that exist in the broader built environment. I also wanted to just mention, and Jeannie brought this up as well, but in terms of big tent sustainability, we have a lot of targets that are geared around diversity, equity, and inclusion, community engagement. We're a signatory to the Washington Employers for Racial Equity, which is really geared around ensuring racial equity for Black Washingtonians, but we apply that commitment to all of our different geographies. My team also manages our vendor diversity program, so we have additional goals and actions associated with contracting and uplifting diverse-owned businesses across the country. So really thinking about that intersectionality and the opportunities that exist not only in the climate space, but also in the equity space as well. In addition, we have some community goals geared around community service and philanthropy. We're targeting directing $1 million in philanthropic dollars to climate-related organizations by 2025. And so really, we've got this much bigger lens in terms of the work that we're trying to do, not only in our own operations, but thinking about the social opportunities there as well. And then beyond that, thinking about the ways that we can influence the industry and the broader built environment to do better and to be better as an entire entity.
Great, thanks, Josh. Last but not least.
All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. It's exciting to be here and to be with you and talk about a really important issue. And so let me talk about Deloitte for just a second, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we've done. We're a very large professional services firm. A lot of people think of Deloitte as an accounting firm, and that's how we were founded, if I did the math right, 177 years ago in 1845. But we are a professional services firm that includes our audit and assurance business, our tax business, our financial and risk advisory business, and our consulting business. Well, what does that mean? It means all the things that you heard from my colleagues up here today, as well as what universities and nonprofits are doing, as well as what governments are doing, we help them do that. We help them with strategy, we help them with implementation, we help them with measurement. And we do that all over the world. So it's great to be here. Let me talk a little bit about what we're doing internally in this space. And one of those things that we do is we help people with marketing and global branding. And so we came up with our own brand around this, which we call World Climate. And the tagline to World Climate is that climate change is not a choice, it's billions of them. And we make those choices every day. So what we're trying to do by our near-term goals of 2030, based on scientific-based targets, is reduce Scope 1 and 2 emissions 70% from the 2019 baseline. And Scope 3, our business travel reduction of 50%. Obviously, during the pandemic, that was a little easy to make. Now we have to do it after the pandemic. We want 2/3 of our major suppliers to be using science-based targets to set them and use them. We want 100% of our building energy to be renewable, and we want to convert our vehicle fleet to hybrid EV and other zero-emission vehicles. We're now in the process of setting our long-term goals, but we've also committed $1 billion from the partnership to our sustainability and climate business across the firm globally. One of the things we did is we established the Deloitte Center for Sustainable Progress. And another example of that is our partnership with CU Boulder. We launched the Climate Innovation Collaboratory earlier this year, and I can talk a little bit about that as we get to the end. We're also working to empower our people in this effort. One of the things that we've committed to do is provide climate literacy training for all 425,000 of those people around the world. We've also focused on a hybrid work environment because one of our biggest emissions is travel to work. And as we come out of the pandemic, one of the things we're looking at is where do we need to be to do the work? Sometimes that's in our office, sometimes that's in our clients' offices, but sometimes it can happen from your house, your backyard, or in my case yesterday, a hotel room in Boulder. Let me leave it there and we'll go on to the next questions.
Wonderful, thank you. The next question is, what is driving these sustainability commitments at your company? Because underpinning sustainability and ESG initiatives, there's clearly a business case in terms of risks and opportunities, and the fact that young people care deeply about climate and equity. And I think there's a moral imperative in terms of doing the right thing for future generations. So I'm curious, let's start with Mark and Jeannie, who represent the public companies. And I'm curious, how are you making the argument to the market that these sustainability commitments have value?
Yeah, I think it's important for every company to really be intellectually honest about its why. And for Microsoft, we both have a very idealistic and a very pragmatic why. The idealistic is that we're a big, powerful company. We have a footprint across the whole world, and we need to be a good global citizen, and we need to make sure that we invest in the world around us, and that understand that the effects of climate change are most are the harshest on the people who least caused it. So, we do believe from the very top of the company, and Satya is one of the most empathetic people I've ever known, that it is the right thing to do, and we need to do our part, and then we need to go further. The pragmatic part of the answer is that we have material business in most major countries in the world, and we're a material part of those economies. And if the world around us is not doing well, we're not going to continue to do well. So you really need to invest in the world around you, and that's really our why.
Mm-hmm. Great. Jeannie?
We have a similar why, and we talked about this earlier, and so maybe I'll just start with our business purpose, which is really about betterment of people and the planet. So that's ingrained in our business DNA. But we do see a reciprocal relationship between profit and purpose. The better we perform as a company, the more we can enable our purpose. And so those go hand in hand. So it's definitely a reciprocal relationship. And I like to give an example of how we demonstrated value through a green bond issuance that we completed a couple of years ago. So we developed a green bond framework that aligned with the strategies within our sustainability and responsibility framework, and looked to see what it would look like to issue a green bond that had a sustainability KPI, or a bond with a sustainability KPI. And it was incredibly successful. It was oversubscribed. We had incredible pricing. We attracted a diverse set of investors. And at the end of the day, we were able to complete our reporting with 1 year to demonstrate that we allocated full use of proceeds to a number of sustainability projects that align with our strategy, and really demonstrate that interconnection between profit and purpose through this very successful transaction.
Okay, and for Ashley and Josh, what's driving sustainability at your companies? Why are you doing this?
Yeah, well, as Catherine already noted, so McKinstry is a privately held company, which means that we don't have to make that case to shareholders. But when we think about our stakeholders, which include our people, our communities, the planet, our clients, these commitments undoubtedly have value. We are an extremely values-oriented company, and one of our 4 values is to make a positive difference. And so we do index pretty heavily on the it's the right thing to do part of it. It's also no secret that the construction industry historically has been super laggard around all of these things: climate, equity, representation, community partnerships. And so for us, that's also a really driving portion of this, is that we want to see that be different, and we want to see the industry change and be better. And that can mean also being out on a limb sometimes in terms of being an exemplar, or being able to go a little bit further to be a trailblazer in some of these spaces. I also just want to acknowledge that there's a huge market opportunity for sustainability in buildings, which is precisely the work that McKinstry does. So both the purpose and profit side of the house for us as a private company as well. Especially with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, we're going to see a huge influx of funding around energy efficiency and renewable energy and decarbonization strategies for buildings. And so for us, there's a direct tie and a direct correlation to our clients and to the market opportunity. And we can't tell our clients to decarbonize and be more efficient if we ourselves aren't doing it as well. So there definitely is an authenticity part of it. And the last piece I wanted to quickly touch on in terms of an example, one really interesting project that I think highlights these multiple tiers of value is a local project that we are doing with the City and County of Denver. We're installing and operating 3.6 megawatts of solar PV at 10 different sites across the city of Denver that are all community solar gardens, including the airport, National Western, a number of different community centers. The project's being paid for through the voter-approved Climate Protection Fund. But one of the coolest things about the project is that it includes a significant amount of community engagement strategies as part of it. There's workforce development programs for underserved local Denver residents, and 30% of the energy produced is going to be donated for free to income-qualified Denver Public Schools families that need help paying their energy bills. So I think it's just the perfect example of the types of projects that we really love that have these multiple layers of value to it. It's a great project for us solely from a business perspective, but it also has all of these other tiers of value in terms of our communities, the local residents, the city, their sustainability goals, and then also the planet as well.
So what drives us at Deloitte? Purpose, people, prosperity. Like McKinstry, purpose is a core piece of who we are. But let me talk about the prosperity and the people for a second. We released a study earlier this year at Davos on the economic impacts, the economic costs of inaction on climate, but also the economic benefits of action on climate. And if you get a chance, the Clock Tower Project has a really interesting, about 6-minute movie to kind of give you some perspective on this. So by 2070, if we do nothing, if we actually don't address climate impacts in the world, the global economy will lose $178 trillion. $178 trillion. Those 10 billion people, we actually won't get there because you lose $178 trillion in economic activity, and that has a huge impact on the most vulnerable people in the world. But what happens if we actually do what we're talking about doing? If we meet the Paris commitments, if we actually make these huge investments into clean energy, into sustainability, all the things we've been talking about up here, what happens? What happens is we grow the global economy by $43 trillion. So the argument that climate change is too expensive to deal with, just the opposite is true. It is too expensive not to deal with. The spread on that between doing something and not doing something is over $200 trillion to the global GDP. That is the business case. Let me talk about the people for a second. It's actually our brilliant young staff who drive innovation and success at Deloitte. I get to work with them every day, and it's one of the reasons I'm at the firm. They are the ones who are doing all of this amazing work that we get to do. It's not Debbie and I. It's our incredible team that's here in the audience today. So how do we recruit and retain them? Well, one way we do that is we treat them well and we provide broad opportunities where they can do stuff that they like to do. And we work hard, but we focus on people. But the second reason is we are leaning forward on two things that young people really care about. And they are TikTok and, climate and equity. That's why climate and equity are the future of the business, because that's what they care about, and these are the future leaders, the future clients, and they care about these issues, and we know that is where the business is going.
Great point. So this next question is for Mark and Jeannie primarily, although everyone's welcome to comment on it. How does the public know that your company's commitments aren't just greenwashing, right? Because we read about companies that communicate strong sustainability commitments while quietly lobbying through the back door against climate policy. So how do we know that your companies are walking the talk?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very big topic, and there was a big part of that really came through at COP, right? For us, I think the most important thing is just to be super transparent. So we have an annual sustainability report that we are right now on the third version of. It is 120 pages long. You can find it on Microsoft.com/sustainability, and you can find our report. quite easily and download it as a PDF. In that report, we talk about all the things we've done right, but we also talk about all the mistakes that we've made. And we are, because we are 0.03% of global emissions, we really view our role as being out early and being a leader in this space. We're really writing like the 200-page Harvard business case on how to decarbonize a company. And that case has twists and turns in the plot and has lots of stuff. So in addition to publishing our annual report, we're a frequent publisher of white papers. We published a white paper a couple years ago, which was lessons learned from an early carbon removal purchase, where we purchased in our first year 1.3 million metric tons of durable carbon removal, which was incidentally half of the global supply. So there's a whole nother reason we have our Climate Innovation Fund, because we need to increase the world supply. So we're really just a pretty serious publisher and chronicler, publisher and sharer of our journey, which is both inspiring but imperfect.
Right, great.
Great, thanks. So for us, similarly, transparency is it's critical. And as we're seeing a heightened focus from a regulatory perspective on ESG disclosure, we know that we need to put a finer point on data collection, data quality, data accuracy, and be able to communicate that through standard reports and surveys such as CDP. We also have an annual sustainability report. I don't think it's 120 pages, maybe this year it was 80, but that's where we outline progress toward our goals and be very thoughtful and straightforward around the impact that we have on the environment and what we are trying to do to resolve that. So our industry accounts for about 10% of global emissions. That's a lot. And so that means collectively across our industry, we need to be working not just us VF across our 12 brands, but with our competitors, with our peers, and then outside of our industry. So the more that we can do that in a transparent way to demonstrate the progress we're making, that is critical to demonstrating what we're trying to focus on. Now, risk management is another piece of what we feel strongly about. And so as part of our disclosures, we last year conducted a climate risk assessment aligned with TCFD, or the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. And now we have elevated climate change and sustainability to an enterprise risk at VF. So it is really it's a high level, very high visible part of our risk management program. And then we disclose that through our reporting as well. And if anyone's watching the, who knows what's going to happen with the SEC climate risk disclosure rule, but we know that we're going to have to at least disclose our scope 1 and 2 emissions. We may have to disclose financial related climate risk scenarios. So we're getting to this point, we're here, and it's not going to change. We're on this path forward where disclosure is only going to increase. So transparency is incredibly important to us. Now I just wanted to touch briefly on another topic of traceability. So if you go to our website and you can look at over 100 of our products, such as our iconic checkerboard Vans, and trace the journey of our shoe all the way back to the raw materials. So you can watch this shoe go from the raw materials to processing to manufacturing to product assembly. And along the way, you can look at pictures of the people making our products, of the factories where we've installed rooftop solar. And you can read the stories. You can see what we're really trying to do from a transparent process. And so we've published 100 maps for our products. And we're also in the process of tracing our top 5 materials back across our supply chain as well, to really demonstrate our focus on transparency.
Thank you. I think in the interest of time, we'll just move to the next part, which is around the challenges to progress. We started with commitments and action, and now I'd love to hear from each of the panelists about what challenges is your company facing in reaching the commitments that you've made to a sustainable future for all, and generally speaking, what more needs to be done, and in any order.
Let me start. So I think I talked about this a little bit earlier. Business travel is one of the biggest things that we do. We're a consulting firm. And during COVID, it was really easy to lower that. But now we have to figure out how to do that. And this is a conversation that we have with our employees. It's a conversation we have with our clients. And the good news is that our clients are looking at this and saying, yeah, there are times when we need you sitting here. But there are other times when we can get, on video, or we can do this by email. And it's having that conversation. It's not just assuming if I really want this job, I'm just going to go. You actually have to make a purposeful decision about it. Availability of green goods and services. The market is maturing, but at this point, there's actually a lot more demand than there is supply on some of these things. And so, I talked about converting fleets to electric vehicles. This is an area where the demand is very high right now, and the ability to meet that demand. The good news is we're actually working with our clients in those industries and helping them increase that in the supply chain. I think the politicization, I can't say that word this morning, of this issue is a challenge for everybody. It really should be a basic economic issue. Mark Carney said, companies who don't understand and address climate risk will fail. The second part of that quote often doesn't get reported, which is, but there's a lot of money to be made in dealing with it. And so we have to look at this as an economic issue. As I said earlier, it's $43 trillion of opportunity out there, and we want to help all of our clients meet that.
I can go next. Yeah, so one of the things that I wanted to highlight to this question today that I thought might be different from my other colleagues here is around fleet electrification. So the largest source of our operational GHG emissions as a company is in our commercial construction fleet. We have about 600 fleet vehicles that are on the road, predominantly in the Pacific Northwest, but a number of different states. And we have set a target to be fully electrified in our fleet by 2030. And one of the things that's unique and different for us is that we're talking about medium and heavy duty commercial construction vehicles, which are very different from passenger vehicles or even delivery vans that we are seeing more availability of in the market right now in terms of EVs. So this really is a new territory without a super defined playbook. There are some entities that claim to be experts in this space, but really we have found that there's not a single expert, and every fleet is different and the challenges are different, and it's pretty complex to think through all of the different intricacies of it. And one of the pieces for us that's a particular potential challenge is that most of our fleet vehicles are actually taken home each night by our craft workers. And so figuring out charging and reimbursements is going to be a big challenge. What do we do if somebody rents? What if they don't have a garage? What if we install infrastructure and then they leave McKinstry? Do we go take it back, right? Like, how do we figure out all of those different parts and pieces around this element? We also, in the construction part of our business, we're a union contractor. And so there's some additional complexity as well around just navigating collective bargaining agreements and some of our just promises to our union partners in terms of vehicles and making sure that we come through on all of that. I think we're trying to figure out some clean fuel credit opportunities in Washington and Oregon in this space as well, and really just understand how we can best maximize some of the opportunity that exists there. And then the last piece, which Josh just mentioned a little bit and I'll double down on, is that there's a diverse range of opinions when it comes to electrifying our fleet. We do have a number of folks that are very excited about it and would love the opportunity to get an EV. And we also have drivers that are less excited for a number of different reasons. It could be just maybe lack of agreement with electrification. It could also just be anxiety about, can these cars do the types of things that we need them to do in the course of our business? So we have procured our first 4 electric vehicles in our fleet, and we're really working right now on doing some proof of concept work around soliciting opinions, getting feedback, and then really trying to demonstrate this transition in terms of being good for our business and at the same time helping to reduce emissions, but predominantly being something that's good for people, good for McKinstry writ large.
Wonderful.
Yeah, we'll just go ahead.
Okay, sure. So I'll also speak about something that's quite a bit different from the others on the panel, is the availability of sustainable raw materials. So as I mentioned, the majority of our impacts come from raw materials and factory operations. So we need to lean in on material substitution for our top 9 materials. How do we get there? There's only so much recycled polyester in the world. There's only so much organic cotton. So how we're thinking about it is we're creating our own supply of sustainable raw materials. And the way we're doing this is thinking about, where do our materials come from? So cotton, rubber, wool, leather coming from animals that are all coming from land, from agriculture. So sometimes we think about our company as almost like an agriculture company when we're sourcing our materials. So regenerative agriculture practices is an area that we see a great future, and how we're going to overcome this challenge is starting to invest in helping farmers transform land to more sustainable agriculture practices. This means getting away from pesticide and fertilizers, no-tilling, and really getting back to a natural way of agriculture. And we have a couple of examples that are super exciting. So we partnered with our wool company in New Zealand Merino, to create the first regenerative platform for wool. And we're already sourcing wool from this area, and we're seeing the benefits to the farmers. The other really exciting project is we've invested in the first regenerative rubber pilot in the world in Thailand. And so we are actually helping farmers transform from the monoculture types of agriculture to very lush, regenerative, sustainable practices. And now I actually had the opportunity to be in Thailand a couple weeks ago to visit with the farmers. And the gratitude is just so inspiring that they have diversified income from being able to not just only sell rubber, but to also sell fruit and honey from bees, because now they have this lush land. And you can walk 10 feet away and see this monoculture land that's very dry, even in Thailand, and warmer. And you go to a regenerative plot, and the temperature is cooler. It's a vibrant ecosystem. So it's a really exciting path forward. And we know that if we can store more carbon in the ground than is emitted to the atmosphere, that is a fantastic contribution that we can make.
Yeah, there's certainly a common thread here in investing in your own supply. So we face many challenges, but I would say that the three that sort of come to mind is supply of renewable energy, supply of durable carbon removal credits, and then measuring scope 3. On the supply, last year we purchased about 5.8 gigawatts of renewable energy, and that is through power purchase agreements. So we have a 60-person energy team that is buying forward contracts all the time. And at the same time, I oversee our Climate Innovation Fund. We are investing in a lot of those projects as an investor. So one of the things that's neat is we see the market as a buyer and as an investor. And there's a circularity to that. For example, we are a $50 million investor in Climeworks, which is the world's first operational direct air capture plant in Hellisheidi, Iceland. I was there about a month ago. What an amazing thing to see, where you can actually just suck carbon out of the air. So this idea of not enough supply. Carbon removal, again, as distinct from an avoided emissions offset, where you're simply paying somebody to not do something they otherwise would do. Durable carbon removal is a net new tree, or direct air capture, or carbon capture at the source, where you are removing durably and permanently carbon from the air. Last year, Microsoft purchased about half of the global supply of durable carbon removal credits. And that's a market that's in the hundreds of millions today. And if you fast forward to 2050, and you say, okay, let's take our 50 billion metric tons of carbon, and let's say the world reduces 30 of that. We still have 20 to remove. And that's the net in net zero, right? So we're going to have to remove 20 gigatons of carbon from the air. At $100 a ton, that's a $2 trillion industry. There will be Microsoft and Amazon and Google-sized companies that come from the carbon removal industry. And so this is, I think, the most underappreciated space. At COP, we talk about mitigation, we talk about adaptation and loss and damage, but we're not talking about durable carbon removal. And I say watch this space. That's a huge thing that is going to really have to happen at a massive, like 3 orders of magnitude scale in the future. I'll skip our challenges with scope 3, which is really the nested doll problem of responsibility without authority, but we can come back to that.
Okay, well, building on this conversation around challenges, we have a lot of scientists in the room, we have a lot of people from the university, local community, local government, business. And so I guess the logical question is how can we work together, right, to address some of these challenges? And so I'd like to ask about partnerships. And in particular, I'm wondering, is your company collaborating with universities and others to meet your sustainability commitments and accelerate innovative solutions? And I'd really love for this panel to spark action. And so I'm wondering if there might be an opportunity for us, the university and the private sector, to collaborate toward common goals.
Well, it's a softball question for me, so I'll take it first. we're doing this all over the world, but we're doing it right here, right now, with CU Boulder as part of the Climate Innovation Collaboratory. And I see my colleague Evan and others who are core parts of this. We are working together to develop new technologies, to help municipalities, states, federal governments, companies be successful at this and commercialize these technologies. Because as we talked about, that is what has to happen to address the challenges, and that's how we get to that $43 trillion in growth.
Great. Yeah.
Great. Well, yeah, we do a ton of work in the education space. Actually, about a third of our total company revenue comes from partnerships with K-12 and higher education institutions. So we've done a lot of work with higher ed institutions across the country, including CU Boulder. We've had the privilege of working with CU Boulder on some projects in the past and are auditing some buildings for efficiency opportunities on campus right now. But the one project I really actually wanted to speak to relative to this question is our super innovative Catalyst building in Spokane, Washington. McKinstry developed, designed, and delivered this building in partnership with the local utility Avista and also with Eastern Washington University. And it is recognized by ILFI as the largest zero energy, zero carbon building in North America, which is pretty amazing. It's a 5-story building that houses a number of Eastern's educational programs, including their computer science program. So it's also a fairly energy intensive building, which makes its performance even more impressive. And the building has a number of neat features. It features an eco-district, which uses a shared energy model. It is also made almost entirely from cross-laminated timber, not structural steel. It leverages daylighting, on-site solar. It has a super impressive building envelope to it. And so I recognize, Catherine, you're asking about some of the strategic and thought partnerships aspects too, and Catalyst also is that. Other than it being a really exciting building, we have some initiatives to make it an ongoing living laboratory and some ongoing research grants with students and faculty to learn about the building and investigate new sustainable technologies and different ways to design and innovate. So I think that it's a really exciting opportunity and something we're going to continue to leverage in the future. And the last one I wanted to briefly mention is we're also working with the University of Washington. They have a program called the Carbon Leadership Forum run out of UW, and we're a signatory to CLF's MEP 2040 commitment, which is really intended to focus on removing embodied carbon from mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems in buildings. So really focusing on the research and partnership aspect to understand different ways that we can tackle some of those systems and really make buildings more sustainable in all of the aspects of their design.
Super exciting, and that's my alma mater, so University of Washington, go Huskies. So, like my other panelists, we partner all the time with higher ed, with universities, and it's really such a fantastic path forward. We do case competitions on a very regular basis where students will take on a project or look at one of our brands, look at one of our products, and really dig in and understand what's the consumer drive to this, or they'll compare us to some of our competitors and understand what encourages consumers to buy our products over another brand. So lots of case competitions. We also, another very exciting initiative we recently started, we're in the second year now, is in collaboration with the Pencil Lewis College of Business and Design. And we started looking at my notes here, diversity-focused master class. So we had apprentices come to our brands and really learn alongside with our designers. And we just wrapped up our second year, and now several of those apprentices are now working within Vans and Timberland. So it's a true example of bringing in some diversity into our brands to create the future products for the world.
Yeah, Microsoft has partnerships with educational institutions, hundreds and hundreds around the world. Most of those are executed at a subsidiary level around the world. So I could talk a lot about all those things, but the thing I'll use the short amount of time to talk about is what we're trying to do is work with the educational institutions of the world of all forms, including, if you stretch that definition to LinkedIn Learning, to really upgrade the global skilling gap in sustainable skills. At CU today, I'm sure you can get an environmental science degree. I don't think you can get a carbon accounting degree. And there's probably a need for more degrees on what does it mean to do environmental engineering, environmental product design. So there's just there's some think tanks think there's about 18 million jobs needed to execute on the Paris Agreement. Most of those people don't exist yet, and they're not skilled and they're not trained. So we really see this huge educational skills gap. We're going to work with our sister company, LinkedIn, but we're also really pushing on the whole higher educational institution channel to develop curriculum that is really more than just in environmental science degrees. There's both depth and there's breadth. Like even some degrees don't need to be like a sustainability degree per se, but if you're in corporate procurement today, you better darn well know a lot about sustainability. And the same goes to most functions in every corporation. So there's kind of a breadth bit of things you need education-wise, and then there's deeper degrees beyond environmental science. And we're trying to advocate to fill that global skilling gap.
Mark, I'm glad to hear you say that. I know here at CU Boulder, we've had a lot of conversations, and there's a lot of work being done to integrate sustainability into everything that we do across the university. So I think we're moving more in that direction, and I'm really excited about the potential. So the last question, and we're going to keep this, we're going to end on more of a personal note. At the end of the day, given everything that you know about the climate crisis and the current state of the world, what gives you hope? You want to start, Josh, and go down?
Sure. One of the things that gives me hope is looking out here and on a Saturday, on a beautiful Saturday, seeing everybody in here being part of this, especially in a place that was somewhat hard to find. And not on the app, but but you're all here, so thank you, because that's about action. The brilliant young people who I talked about earlier give me hope. Look, humans are really good at innovation. It's one of the things we do best. And I know if we work on it, we'll succeed. The choice is ours, but I am very optimistic about it.
I love that. There are a lot of things that give me hope, and I chose to focus this today just with the built environment lens relative to the panel and some of the things that I've been talking about. And so I would say what gives me hope is the fact that we can make buildings better. We've seen that play out at the Catalyst building and many other places across the country. And one thing I didn't mention just a minute ago when I was talking about Catalyst is it's not only a zero energy, zero carbon building, but it was delivered at zero cost premium. So we can do these things. We can build new buildings that are better and uber efficient. We can retrofit existing buildings so that they have a much lower footprint in terms of the planet and some of the negative impacts that they make. And it feels to me like in the climate space, we're sometimes grappling for solutions that don't yet exist or maybe haven't been tested at scale. And in the built environment space, the solutions are already here. And it's actually not that radical of an idea. We can design buildings better. We can retrofit existing buildings and get rid of fossil fuel systems. We can electrify everything, increase efficiency, get the rest of the energy that's needed from renewable sources, and we can pay for it. We can make it financially viable. And so knowing that that tool is already in the toolbox, and it really just is a matter of choice, of choosing to make that difference and being able to touch a huge portion of global GHG emissions, that really gives me hope.
Excellent. Well, a couple of comments. So I think coming out of COP27, one of the main messages I've heard is that we really need to move from commitment to action. And I am so inspired from what I've heard on the panel today about the true action that is being taken today. And I know that what we're focused on and what you are focused on is really making a difference. The second point I'll make is that it's about collective action. So we know that within our own industry, there's a lot of partnerships taking place, but we can't do it alone just with the apparel and footwear industry. We need to work with the food industry. We need to work with the tire industry on rubber. And we're starting to see those partnerships take place, and that's really exciting. But I think what gives me the most hope is what you mentioned, Josh, is looking out here and seeing all of you today. And I'm personally very excited that my dad and my stepmom are here today. They have dedicated their careers to sustainability. I have now dedicated mine. My son is out here somewhere, and he's probably going to do the same. Well, he better. But I think it's just that passing the torch and inspiring all of us to really take that action. We all feel it. We all feel that urgent action that needs to be taken, and it's happening.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of reasons to be optimistic. I mean, we live in a world where, the press washes over us and it can get kind of demoralizing. But I sit in a super interesting, if not privileged spot where I oversee our climate innovation fund. So this is a $1 billion venture style fund. It's an impact fund, though we're not trying to get outsized returns. We've seen about 1,800 proposals. We've made 49 investments and invested $600 million plus in the last 3 years. So it's a very interesting place to sit. And the millennial, a lot of these young founders that are working with are millennial Gen Z founders. It's mind-blowing, the level of innovation that's out there. I said earlier, a month ago, I was in Hellisheidi, Iceland, looking at this amazing direct air capture plant, and we're now scaling up to be a second one. I'm a frequent presenter in our executive briefing center where I work with Fortune 500 companies. I was recently with a tire company, and they have figured out a way to incinerate old tires and create green hydrogen, incinerate them in a closed environment so they're not having all these negative emissions. Like, who would have thunk it? Who would have thunk anything? There's nothing good that can happen from burning tires, but they figured that out. And so that was like a big aha, right? I was at COP, and we sponsored this kind of Shark Tank style thing. And we gave this award, this $50,000 grant, to this lovely young lady from Ghana who has figured out this soil sequestration, and she's now proliferating that throughout her villages in Ghana, and we're going to try to help her scale that on a global scale. So the amount of innovation that is happening, the amount of young, bright minds, and old, bright minds for that matter too, it's really, really awesome. And if we could just get some of these foreground challenges like pandemics and wars kind of pushed aside, and the whole world was fighting one war, which is the war on climate, we will get there. It's really a time of amazing innovation with AI and blockchain and compute and so many things. So I'm excited about that.
Well, what an inspiring conversation about achieving positive impact at scale. We're at time. I'd like to thank all of our panelists. It's been really incredible to have you here, and thanks to everyone in the audience and via live stream for joining in. It's been a great conversation. I think the panelists and I will be up here for a few more minutes. If you want to chat, come on up. And yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Great job, guys.
Great job.